Most people skip Isaiah. They hit those chapters in the Book of Mormon and their eyes glaze over. Dense poetry, ancient names, cities that no longer exist. What does any of this have to do with me? Everything. Jacob, the boy raised in the desert, the theologian of the promised land, stands before his people in their new temple and reads from Isaiah. And what he reads is not a history lesson, it is a map of the future, a prophecy so precise that it names events happening right now in your lifetime that Isaiah wrote 2,700 years ago. Tonight, we're going to break open 2 Nephi 6 through 10, and by the end, you'll never skip Isaiah again. Welcome back to Covenant Chronicles. We're now 3 episodes into the Nephite saga, and the story has taken a dramatic turn. Lehi is dead. The family is divided. Nephi has led his people into the wilderness and built a city, a temple, and laid the foundation for a civilization. And now his younger brother Jacob, the child born in the Arabian desert, the one who never knew comfort or Jerusalem or the easy life, stands up to preach. Jacob is going to do something that seems strange to modern readers. He is going to spend most of his sermon quoting Isaiah, chapters of it, dense poetic, prophetic language that can feel impenetrable to anyone who has not been given the key to unlock it. But Jacob had that key. He received it from his father, who received it through revelation. And tonight, we are going to use that same key, the context of the Nephite story, to understand what Isaiah was actually saying. 3 things Isaiah saw that Jacob wanted his people to understand were the scattering of Israel, the rejection of the Messiah, and the gathering that would happen in the last days. All 3 of those prophecies are either unfolding right now or have already been fulfilled with a precision that is very difficult to explain away. Begins by establishing his authority, not his own, but his source. He tells his people, "The things I am about to share were given to me by an angel. I was shown the future. I did not learn this in school or from a book." This matters, because what Jacob is about to teach is not theology built from human reasoning. It is testimony built from direct revelation. He has seen these things, he knows they are true, and the weight of what he knows is almost too much to carry. He says something that reveals the burden of a prophet. He wishes he did not have to speak about the Jews being scattered and suffering. It would be easier not to. But the covenant requires him to testify of it, not to condemn, but to prepare. Jacob's tone throughout this sermon is striking. He is not triumphant. He is not pointing fingers at other people with satisfaction. He is grieving for a nation he has never lived in, whose suffering he has been shown in vision and whose eventual redemption he has also been shown and cannot wait to proclaim. The ancient world had a concept. A prophet was not someone who predicted the future for entertainment. A prophet was a watchman on the wall, someone who saw what was coming and whose only job was to warn the city with enough time for them to respond. Jacob was a watchman, and he had seen the whole timeline. Jacob reads from Isaiah 49 and 50. Chapters written 150 years before the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem, and Isaiah speaks directly to the nation of Israel as if it were a person. You have been sold, scattered, abandoned, and yet the Lord has not forgotten you. The historical fulfillment of this prophecy is one of the most documented events in ancient history. In 586 BC, roughly 14 years after Lehi's family left Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar's armies destroyed the city. They burned the temple. They took the survivors into captivity in Babylon. The nation that had defined itself as God's chosen people was, by every external measure, erased. But the scattering didn't stop there. In 70 AD, 7 centuries after Isaiah wrote his prophecy, the Romans under Titus destroyed the Second Temple. They expelled the Jewish population from Judea, and the Jewish people dispersed across Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and eventually the entire world, where they would remain scattered for nearly 19 centuries. 19 centuries. No homeland, no central government, no temple. Persecuted in nearly every nation they entered. And yet, as Isaiah had also prophesied, they maintained their identity, their language, their covenant, and their faith with a tenacity that has no parallel in human history. Isaiah called it a nation scattered, but not destroyed, afflicted, but not forgotten, the servant of the Lord who would be despised and rejected, and then restored. Jacob reads this to his people and says, look at what God told us would happen, and then look at what actually happened. Is there any reason to doubt the rest of the prophecy? Then Jacob arrives at the heart of Isaiah's testimony. The suffering servant of Isaiah 53, one of the most debated passages in all of religious literature. Isaiah writes of a figure who will be despised and rejected, wounded for our transgressions, led as a lamb to the slaughter. Who will make his grave with the wicked and the rich? Who will see his seed and prolong his days, resurrected after making his soul an offering for sin? Jacob reads this and says plainly, this is the Christ. This is the Messiah who will come to Jerusalem, be crucified, and rise again. He then makes a historical prediction that would have sounded outrageous to anyone hearing it in 550 BC. The Jews, the very nation to whom the Messiah will come, will reject him. They will stumble at the stumbling block. They will look for a warrior king and find a suffering servant. They will look for political liberation and find a man on a cross. Jacob is not saying this to condemn the Jewish people. He says explicitly, because of priestcraft and iniquities, they shall be scourged by other nations. But this will not last forever. It is a temporary blindness, not a permanent rejection. The historical weight of this prophecy is extraordinary. Written 600 years before the birth of Christ, preserved in the brass plates that Nephi retrieved from Laban in Jerusalem, read in a temple in the Americas by a man who had never seen Jerusalem and never would. And yet, the detail is precise. The rejection, the crucifixion, the nations that would scatter Israel afterward, the centuries of wandering that would follow. Jacob's point is not triumphalism. His point is this: if these things were prophesied and then happened exactly as written, then the rest of the prophecy, the gathering, the restoration, the return, will also happen exactly as written. Then Jacob stops quoting Isaiah and starts preaching. And what he preaches in 2 Nephi 9 is one of the most complete and searching explanations of the atonement in all of Scripture. He begins with the problem, not sin in the abstract, but death, physical death and spiritual death. Jacob calls these the two great enemies of the human soul, the grave, which takes the body, and hell, which would claim the spirit were it not for the intervention of God. He calls death and hell an awful monster, not a gentle metaphor, a monster, something that devours without mercy, that cannot be bargained with, that no human power can overcome. And then Jacob asks the question that drives the entire sermon: what kind of God would create beings capable of experiencing that kind of destruction and then leave them without a rescue? His answer: not this God, not the God of Israel, not the God who spoke to Lehi in Jerusalem and led a family through the desert to preserve a covenant. Oh, how great the goodness of our God, who prepareth a way for our escape from the grasp of this awful monster. Yea, that monster death and hell, which I call the death of the body, and also the death of the spirit. The atonement, Jacob explains, works on two levels simultaneously. It overcomes physical death through the resurrection, which is unconditional and universal. Every person who has ever lived will be resurrected. The grave will not have the final word, but the second death, the spiritual one, requires something more. It requires a choice. To come unto Christ, to be cleansed, to allow the atonement to do what only it can do, satisfy the demands of justice while extending the gift of mercy. Jacob then does something unusual for an ancient preacher. He lists the people the atonement is specifically for. Not the righteous only, not the obedient only. He lists the sick, the afflicted, the poor, the needy, the broken in heart, and the sinner. He says, "Come as you are, not as you wish you were. Come now in the condition you are actually in. The feast is prepared. The door is open." And then Jacob returns to the timeline after the scattering, after the rejection of the Messiah, after centuries of suffering. The prophecy says something that would have seemed impossible to any rational observer standing in 550 BC or 1900 AD. The scattered will be gathered. The covenant people will return to their land. And in the last days, the Gentile nations, people who were not part of the original covenant, will play a role in that gathering. In 1948, the State of Israel was established. For the first time in 1,878 years, the Jewish people had a national homeland. Jewish communities from Europe, from North Africa, from Yemen, from Ethiopia, from the former Soviet Union began returning to the land their ancestors had been expelled from nearly 2 millennia before. That event, the largest voluntary migration of a dispersed people in recorded history, had been sitting in the Book of Mormon since the 1830s, which was itself translated from plates written in 600 BC, from prophecies written in 750 BC. Jacob is not reading the news. He is reading the plan. But the gathering Jacob describes is not only physical, it is spiritual. He prophesies that in the last days the house of Israel, including the Nephite descendants, the lost tribes, all the scattered branches of the covenant family, will be gathered back to the knowledge of their Redeemer. The Book of Mormon, Jacob implies, is part of that gathering. It is a record preserved for a generation that would need it. A voice from the dust, his people's dust, calling to their descendants across thousands of years. Near the end of this section, Nephi pauses and gives us the key to understanding Isaiah that most people never find. He says, Isaiah's words are hard for many to understand because they do not know the manner of prophesying among the Jews. The difficulty is not intelligence, it is context. Isaiah wrote for people who understood the covenant, the history of Israel, and the prophetic tradition. Without that background, the poetry becomes opaque. But Nephi, who grew up in Jerusalem, who knew the scriptures, who received personal revelation about the same events Isaiah was describing, says, I, Nephi, have been shown all these things, and I know that they're true. His invitation is simple and remarkable. Liken the scriptures to yourselves. Don't read Isaiah as ancient history that happened to other people. Read it as a letter written to you, about your time, about the generation that would be alive when these prophecies reached their fulfillment. We are that generation. The scattering happened, the Messiah came, the rejection happened, the centuries of suffering happened, the gathering is happening now. What remains is the final act, the spiritual gathering, the return of people from every nation and background to the covenant of Christ. the feast that Jacob described in 2 Nephi 9. Isaiah didn't write ancient poetry. He wrote a news broadcast. He just sent it back on time. 2 Nephi 6 through 10 is not a detour in the Nephite story. It is the theological foundation on which everything else is built. Jacob preaches the atonement more clearly than almost anyone in the Old Testament world. He places it in its historical context, the scattering, the Messiah, the gathering, so that his people understand not just what God did, but why and when and for whom. The answer to that last question is the one Jacob most wants you to hear for everyone: the sick, the poor, the broken, the sinner, the person who thinks they have disqualified themselves from the feast. You have not disqualified yourself. The door is still open, the feast is still prepared, and the prophecy that brought a family across the desert and an ocean to preserve these words was written in part for you. Don't walk the wilderness alone. Subscribe. Come back next week. We'll continue the journey. This is Covenant Chronicles. Straight to the point and straight to the heart. I'll see you in the next video.